this is gonna work. Let's see.
And then just click the purple present. Yeah. Throwing Emily right in. This is her first go.
There, I
running
did it.
the peer group.
It worked.
Yay, way to go. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have Stacy Timmons joining us, the Associate Director of Hydrology, New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources at New Mexico Tech. And I will always appreciate you explaining, like, I don't know who she's with, New Mexico Water Data Initiative, New Mexico Tech, you're with all sorts of groups. So I believe all you're familiar with the New Mexico Technology Council, supporting our member-led organization committed to supporting the state's tech ecosystem with networking, professional development, public policy. We have monthly peer groups, Women in Technology Awards that we're gearing up for, and we're going to be having that in June. And then our Experience IT conference. And then, of course, being active throughout the legislature. We always want to thank our community partners who support our organization and who are so valuable to us. You can see we've got a great representation of industry sectors and representatives. So thank you so much always to our community partners. Our peer group, a couple of them are on the call right now. Thank you so much. The Big Data and AI group focus on, bringing data issues and the data-driven world and bringing great presentations like the one we have today. Michael Maestas is on, Tony, and Andrew Padilla. Now I turn it over to my colleague, Mary Tiemann, who will tell us a little bit about some of our upcoming events.
Deborah. So we always have a lot going on at the Tech Council. So I'll briefly go through some of the upcoming events that you're going to want to attend as well. Today we have our second Women in 3D Printing presentation that starts today at 4 o'clock. And for more information on registration for that, reach out to us. UNM is hosting their alumni career fair. We are collaborating. We are a partner in that, as well as NM Bio. So if you know of anyone who is looking for a job, please have them register for that event. Our Women in Technology peer group will host their event this Thursday. It's going to be a celebration of Earth Day, and they have a panel discussion, and that starts at 4:30. And then our next cybersecurity peer group will also host a panel discussion. They're going to be talking about something very important, the global supply chain security, and that's May 13th. So you can register for any of those events on our website. And Deb mentioned it, but definitely worth mentioning again is our 13th annual Women in Technology Awards celebration. We're just getting so excited about this. Our keynote speaker will be JJ DiGeronimo. She's the president of Tech Savvy Women, and registration is open for that. You can register right now and take advantage of the early bird registration fee. But if you're a community partner with the Tech Council, then you have tickets for that event, which you'll be getting codes for that very soon. So, and I want to thank the sponsors. Okay, these are the sponsors who have come on board for the Women in Technology 13th Annual Women in Technology Celebration Award. If you don't see your logo on here, reach out to us because we would love to add your logo. And with that, I will turn the presentation back over to Deborah.
And I will turn it over to Andrew to introduce Stacy.
I wasn't sure who was going to do the introduction.
Wait, hold on. I've got one little thing before we go, which is that I would love it if everybody could turn on their video for a second so I can get a picture of us all together for social media and to share the story of the New Mexico Tech Council. I'll just torture you for a second if everyone could, as many people as can. And then if everybody can smile and say cheese. Ready? And wave if you like. Do something.
Water.
Yeah, love it.
Yay.
Water.
Yay, yay, water. All right. Thank you so much for letting me torture you for that. It's so awesome to have pictures of what we do.
So Stacy, now oh, okay, Andrew. Introduce Stacy, and Stacy, you're welcome to pull up your slides if you like.
Gotcha. So on behalf of the Big Data and AI Peer Group, thank you for attending today's presentation. As you may have heard, we have Stacy Timmons presenting. Stacy is the Associate Director of Hydrogeology Programs at the State Geologic Survey at the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources under New Mexico Tech. Working with the Aquifer Mapping Program for the last 15 years, Stacy has worked around the state on hydrologic and geologic research topics and a variety of water data collection and integration endeavors. In 2019, Stacy began leading the implementation of the Water Data Act, a statute that works to improve management, sharing, and integration of the state's water data from multiple agencies and organizations. Allow me to introduce Stacy Timmons. It's all yours, Stacy.
Thank you, Andrew. I will go ahead and start with my presentation here. I really appreciate the invitation from this group and the opportunity whenever I can to talk about water topics, especially this week, recognizing Earth Day coming up and the importance of water in our communities and in New Mexico. As we were talking a little earlier on, I wear a lot of different hats and I'm hoping to shed a few in the near term. But for now, I am technically a hydrogeologist and I manage a group at the New Mexico Bureau of Geology that focuses on the research for New Mexico in the realm of hydrology and geology together. So where water occurs, how it moves through the surface and subsurface of our state and how it interacts with the geology. So that's kind of the context of where I come to this. Definitely not a data or a tech person in training, but I am jumping into that world pretty quickly. Our agency, the New Mexico Bureau of Geology, serves as the State Geologic Survey, and like several other state surveys, we're under a university. So we're a little different than other state agencies in New Mexico, which are directly under the governor's office and a lot of times have a regulatory role. Our agency is non-regulatory, mainly here for research and service to New Mexico. Some of the other hats that I get to wear include leading this water data initiative, as I'll talk about here today. And then I also serve on a couple of different commissions, including the Interstate Stream Commission and the Water Quality Control Commission. So I have lots of different pieces of my life that affect water and data in particular. And I just wanted to mention that aside from my background being a geologist and hydrologist, I'm also a distance runner and a mom. And so if I at some point have kids interrupting me, I apologize. And the runner aspect, I think, has a lot to do with the recognizing that this is not a sprint of getting all of our data put together quickly, but rather this is going to be a long-term process. So definitely more of a long distance effort here that I'll talk us through. So without further ado, I will see if I can get my slides to advance. Okay, so where this is all coming from is that back in 2019, New Mexico passed legislation that was under House Bill 651. You can look it up online. There's a link at the bottom of the screen to read the actual final legislation. This legislation was introduced by State Representative Melanie Stansbury, whose name may be familiar to those of you in Albuquerque and Congressional District 1, as she is now running for that congressional seat. she, along with the Socorro region state representative, Gail Armstrong, put forward this legislation recognizing the need in New Mexico that had been echoed for years, that we need to have better access to our water data for a number of reasons, but mainly for improved water management and planning. And so this legislation was put together, carefully thought out, and then it went through the legislative process, and all sorts of interesting things happened to it. In the end, I think it's strong legislation, now statute, that says that we are going to open up our water data, specifically naming 5 agencies that hold most of the data for New Mexico, and that the activity of the agencies is to better share, integrate, and manage their water data. And this, the legislation does mention working in collaboration with regional data providers as well as national efforts. So the agencies that are named in the legislation, you can see listed here. The Bureau of Geology, the agency that I work for, is named as the convener of this effort. Also in the legislation is the Interstate Stream Commission. This agency is charged with making sure that water is delivered through the various rivers and water basins to their neighboring states under compacts. So that's their main role. The Office of the State Engineer is charged mainly with managing water rights. We were talking earlier about pre-1907 water rights. Those are pretty hot commodities here in New Mexico. That's under the realm of the Office of the State Engineer, water quantity topics. The New Mexico Environment Department here works on mostly regulating water quality impacts, so drinking water, discharge permits that may affect water, groundwater in the realm of where potential contaminants may occur, and other things kind of related to like gas stations and how those might play a role in water quality. So the last agency listed here, Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources, that agency is specifically tasked with regulating the oil and gas industry, and that's kind of the part where water comes to play. In the produced water and fracking water, that there's a great interest in making sure we have that data accessible to us. And then also related to some of the mines in New Mexico. So coal mines, for example, has some water quality data related to it. So today I'm going to talk through some of the different water data pieces. What water data are we talking about? And then where we're actually going with the implementation of the statute. So as I see it, and I think several others, water data is really the pure measurements, the properties related to our water. So the data needed for planning and water management, as I said earlier, data related to the quantity of water, how good is that water, is the quality, and how is it used. And so under each of those topics, water quantity, there is a number of different data fields that we could be considering. And I'll talk through each of these categories in a little bit more visual way here in the next few slides. So on to thinking about water quantity measurements. And I'm kind of just going through this thinking that some of you maybe aren't familiar with how we measure water in New Mexico or otherwise. So I beg your pardon if you guys already have your hands around this stuff, but for those of you who don't, this is for your benefit. The water quantity, the way we measure that, comes in a lot of different varieties. And I think that is an important point to consider when we're talking about big data, and the fact that these data are collected all over the state and a variety of different timescales and in a variety of different ways. So when we look at the photo on the left-hand side of the screen here, we can see a stream gauge measurement, for example, and you can see a little stick kind of white sticks pointing up, that's basically tracking the level of the river in this instance over the gauge. And then this particular one has telemetry set up, so the data feed to a database and then are made, have a little QA/QC process before it comes out to the world. A lot of these are maintained by the federal agency, the U.S. Geological Survey. The item on the right-hand side of the screen is a precipitation station. So here you can see an anemometer that spins around and tracks wind speed, but also several collectors for precipitation. And we really want to understand how much precip, snow, or rain falls in a particular area, because that impacts the whole water budget for New Mexico. So some of these stations are on real time with a variety of even actually more than just time series data, but also sometimes there's water quality data that come with some of these stations as well. Looking at
Stacy?
other ways, yes.
I was just curious how many of those you have around the state.
Yeah, of the precip or stream gauges, or both.
Yeah, both.
So the stream gauges, things like this, under the U.S. Geological Survey, I think that there are probably on the order of about 100 stations across the state. And that's maybe sufficient for the level of management that we're doing right now. I would say that in some of the stakeholder engagements that we've been doing, we're hearing that there's probably a need for a little bit more, especially when we get into some of the irrigated landscapes where we divert water into acequias or ditches for water use. So some of those smaller conduits for water, like acequias, are not actually carefully measured and don't have a data stream associated with them. And precipitation is one of those features where it really, we do not have enough coverage on this, especially not with real-time data feeds. So this is one of those, I think one aspect of the Water Data Initiative is to recognize some of the data gaps. And this is one that's been long known that we don't have sufficient coverage, especially, as many of you know, when we have like the monsoon seasons or even some of the winter storm events, it might be snowing in one part of Albuquerque and clear and sunny in another part. So we have very localized weather events that if you're not actually tracking in that specific location, you may not capture that data. So that's certainly something that we want to improve on and highlight through this initiative.
So question, I'm only been in New Mexico a couple of years. What rivers other than the Rio Grande do you look at?
So the major rivers, now I'm wishing I had a map, but I have a map in another presentation. The Rio Grande is the big one. The Pecos River is another big one that flows out to Texas. Up in the northern part of the state, we look at the San Juan and the Animas. Basically, the San Juan leads into the Colorado River Basin, so that's an important water source. And also because the San Juan River is somewhat diverted to bring water to Albuquerque. So the San Juan Chama water supply that you may have heard of, that transfers water from the San Juan over to Albuquerque through a pipeline and through the Chama River. Chama River is also tracked with gauges like this. And then the Gila River out in the southwest part of the state, and the Canadian River up in the very northeastern, not very north, but northeastern part of the state. Those are some of the main ones that are have flow measurements and data tracking on them.
And do you also look at for things like rainwater and so on? And I know that that's never simple to track. Things like the Weather Underground weather station network, or any of the AccuWeathers or weather companies or anything like that?
Yeah. So the stormwater, if that's what you're referring to, just like storm events and how you see like arroyos flashing.
Sorta, kind of real time. What's the water, accumulation? You could, I don't know how many weather stations are across Albuquerque. I haven't looked in quite a while, but there would be hundreds.
Yeah, well, so some of those, the big source for our weather and precip data is typically through NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They have a pretty good way of sharing out those data. I'm not sure that like Weather Underground, because I think that's a lot of almost like citizen science stations that are set up and they contributed. I'm not sure how available it's on, like certainly something we should be bringing together. I think as I get a little further into the presentation, you'll see some of the challenges that we have with gathering all of these data. So I hope that we can bring that to bear in the Water Data Initiative here.
Okay. I used to work with the weather company, Weather Underground, when I was IBM, and Andrew, I don't know if you did or not, but sometime separately, if you'd like to have a talk, let us know.
Yes, that's my my go-to weather app on my phone, so I appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna just give you a little more flavor of how some other locations are measured. This little boat device is also used to measure flow. Here it's being used on the Rio Grande to do a kind of a one-time estimate of flow in a place where there isn't a stream gauge. So these data are collected on a tablet and put into a data system, and again, made available to those researchers working on that location. And then there's a little flume on the right-hand side of the screen where there's a data recorder that's tracking, actually, in this instance, wastewater return to a river. So many different measurements that are collected in all different locations of the state, and many of them in a very high resolution time series, so that you might see a graphic like this that has a data series on the y-axis over time. So it can get quite thick with data as time progresses, and constantly being updated. And groundwater level measurements are another feature that we try to keep track of, much more, I would say, manually collected in most cases. Here in this example, measuring with a steel tape, which I've been measuring groundwater levels for years. And the fact of the matter is that this is the best way to get an accurate measurement of depth to groundwater. And unfortunately, it's very rudimentary. You can see here the right-hand side of the screen. We basically take that tape and you drop it into the well with a little bit of blue chalk on it, and you pull it up and you see where the wet piece of tape is. And so it's like the dipstick in your oil pan. You dip it in and you see where the oil line is, and then know exactly what level you're at. So this is done all over the state for a number of different agencies, and these data are collected in kind of, I would say, field notebooks, sometimes in a tablet form, and brought to bear for decision making and tracking on groundwater levels. Some of the newer technologies coming out that we're using to track groundwater levels include acoustic technology, and also using pressure devices that can continuously track groundwater levels, and in some cases transmit that data in real time through a telemetry service or through a cellular service, as is the case for this one. This is an acoustic device made by a company called Intel, and they has a little sound transmitter at the top that sends a sound down. It reflects off the ground, or off of the water surface, back up to the brains, and then that transmits to a cloud service that turns it into a water level, and then that can be read real time on a little device, such as this guy's here, his tablet, that's tracking his groundwater level in his well out by Magdalena, New Mexico. So those data are coming into this whole water data initiative as well. Water quality measurements are where things get really much more diverse. There are so many different types of water quality measurements, such as going out and just collecting like the pH and the temperature of the water, Or in some places, like in the Rio Grande here, where these folks on the right-hand side are tracking silvery minnow. So that's another water data feature, is a count of some biological data, or fish eggs, how many fish eggs are passing through a particular section of the river. And that also is done very manually. And so a lot of this is both from the field as we collect those samples and those field measurements, but then also taken back to the lab. And so you can imagine the number of data fields that can come out of a laboratory analysis of a water sample, anything from the bacterial kind of content to metals like arsenic and uranium that we're concerned about, or PFAS, the new concern for our water quality. So all of these data coming from a wide region all across New Mexico and across the country. So keeping track of the geospatial nature of the data, as well as the time of when the data are collected, and in some cases the depth from which that data are collected. So thinking about groundwater and how that comes from some feet below the land surface. So we have this truly almost four-dimensional space that we're thinking about the data for on our water in New Mexico. And just to kind of set the water use topic up a little bit, we have on the right-hand side the pie chart of water use for New Mexico from, this is a tiny bit dated, the 2010 water use report. They have a new 2015 one, which is approximately the same. About half, 45% of New Mexico's water use is in the realm of groundwater, and about 55% of our water use is in the surface water category, so rivers and streams and reservoirs. And in total, a lot of our water goes to agriculture. So about almost 80%, 76, I think is the latest number, is going to irrigation for growing crops, growing hay, alfalfa for livestock, things like that, all along our rivers, and in some places away from rivers. And one of the things I wanted to draw your attention to, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's an evaporation piece of the pie right here. So 6.8% of our water use in New Mexico is dedicated to evaporation. So that means that we collect our water in reservoirs such as Elephant Butte, and we have to account for the fact that a whole lot of that water is evaporated, especially in the warmer months of the year. So I think that that's just a testament to some of the challenges that we have ahead. So all different kinds of water uses in New Mexico, a lot of them were shown on that pie chart, things like irrigation, municipal supply, and community supply in smaller rural regions of New Mexico, and wildlife, and the environment also needs water to survive. So I could go back and look at that pie chart. There really isn't a whole lot dedicated to the environment and to the environmental needs for water use for fish and birds and things like that. So that's something that continues to come up in some of the policy discussions about water in New Mexico. And I put this slide in just to kind of highlight the big data challenge around water in particular. And I think that this is common in a lot of data realms, not just water, but we're seeing an exponentially increasing number of data coming out to come to bear for our decision-making needs. And this simple chart just basically shows the proliferation that's expected that we have with the growing number of new sensors coming out, new ways to collect data, new ways to integrate that data, and the range of data types that we can be collecting now, I think is growing. The big problem that we have, not just in New Mexico, but nationally and even globally, is that there really is no consistent, easy way to manage that data that's now proliferating, and no real consistent way for sharing that data and making it readily available for decision making. And so in New Mexico, all those photos and data features that are just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of many types of data available, are housed in what I'll call lovingly a vintage data system they're very disconnected. And so in some of our agencies, we do see quite a bit of paper data. So files on shelves in the basements of the buildings is still a very common way of maintaining our data. In some cases, it's provided in an Excel or some sort of manually entered spreadsheet. In many cases, it's made available through a report where a PDF that is compiling the data results of particular, outings like those river transects where they're counting fish eggs. Some of those data may be available in those sorts of tables. And in some cases, we do have, I would say 1990s, maybe 2000, early 2000s era data systems that are relational databases in some cases, but a lot of data that are really important to the Water Data Initiative, to water management decisions, is in some very old kind of Informix, I think was the term I heard mentioned about a data system in one of our agencies. So there are some really old data systems that we're trying to modernize and bring to these decisions and newer platforms. And as I've walked you through some of the different data sources, I think it's important to acknowledge that while the data systems that hold a lot of these data are still in some ways quite old, we're doing the best we can in New Mexico, I think, to make the data available. There's been a lot of advances to making things available on the internet using like the ESRI interactive web map tools. But still, outside users need to know where to look. They need to know that it's the Environment Department's source water protection website that they're looking for to find a particular data feature, for example. So this slide basically just shows a lot of the different data that are technically publicly available. They're out there for anyone to use, but you really have to know how to look through it, what you're looking for, how to ask this web interface to give you the data that you are looking for to answer your specific question. It isn't exactly user-friendly. And in many cases, you actually have to have some technological skills to bring that data into your platform of choice and manipulate it and actually transform it in many ways to get it to work, to answer your question. So that's kind of the current state of things. And I just, with this slide, wanted to make the point that it's the states that are really, it's not just New Mexico, it's many states that are really kind of lagging behind. And I think the water sector in particular has some real technological disadvantages right now, just because of the way that these data systems were set up. But federally, they've started to make open data a real need, or recognize that need under, I think, a bunch of new data were coming to bear under the Obama administration. But there has been little that has been done at the state level to require open data. So New Mexico, being the forward-thinking state that we were able to get this legislation passed. We're the second state in the country to adopt open data policy on water after California. And so I showed you this before, but basically we've, since 2019, established governance structure of how we're going to move forward on this, with multiple working groups and teams, an implementation team at the center that's really keeping the ball moving ahead, setting up strategies, addressing some of the specific requirements of the legislation, and trying to help bring those already public, technically required to be publicly available data sets into a more accessible format. And I think it's important to highlight that this is being done on almost a shoestring budget. So our state legislation had very, big goals, which I think are important, but no actual funding listed in the statute. So we were able to get 100, it was 110 originally, but now it's down to 100 because of budget cuts, state funding that's dedicated to this project, and building on that with some philanthropic donations. And then we're able to leverage some of that state funding with federal grants, such as the Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program under Applied Science. So we're working to actively grow this funding to support the needs of this kind of effort, which, as you've probably begun to get a handle on, is it's rather big, and it's a big hill to climb. So we have a fund kind of set up at New Mexico Tech under the Bureau of Geology that we can build on this, and we can grow this funding. Meanwhile, doing all the other things that need to happen to bring the data together. So, so the concept of how we're building this is displayed. This is a really big slide to digest, but I want to start with the top, as usual. The concept of what we're trying to do is really federating the water data. We are not trying to build another database. We're not trying to create a place to just hand off your data. Here you go, fix it, Stacy, you guys got this. This is truly a paradigm shift in how New Mexico has managed their water for decades, and manage their water data in particular. So we're really asking them to do a little bit of work on their own end to get their data system, get their data ready, and then open that up so that others can start to access that. And so looking at the image on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the field data collection is the start at the bottom. That feeds into some of the databases. We also have some of those legacy data, the paper data that may someday get scanned in and made available. The hard part of this process really seems to be between that box that says extract, transform, load, the ETL process, up to our kind of cloud-based service. So this is really the part where the agencies are asked to basically create an API or some sort of machine readable data outlet so that we can ingest that through the Water Data Initiative and make it more integrated with other similar data sets. There are multiple agencies collecting groundwater level data. We need to make sure all of that works together. So that this little section right in here is where a lot of our challenges are right now. So over onto that kind of 1 and 2 part of the list of text. So we're asking our data providers to continue doing what they're doing, collecting their data, maintaining it, QA, QCing it, and sharing it to us when ready. I think that's been something that we've had a lot of discussions about with the agencies, is that there's some perception that we're asking them to clean out their closets of data that they've never shared before. And that's truly not the case. We're not trying to make data that's not ready for public consumption. We're not trying to take, proprietary information about, people's names and phone numbers and make that available. It's data that should be public, making it more accessible. And then we're asking them to basically move toward this new API format that it's actually, the format isn't new, it's new to us in New Mexico. It's under the Office Open Geospatial Consortium is the flavor of open source formatting. It's called Sensor Things, and it's an API format. So we're basically saying, here's some instructions for how we want you to share out your data, line up certain fields in this format, and then make that public to us, and we'll put it together from there. This has proven to be more of a challenge than we expected, in part because most of the state agencies that are asked to participate on this have very limited IT resources. Their IT staff don't have the technical capacity to do these things. They've never built an API. They don't know what that means. They have their 1990s database and that's what they do. So going back to that paradigm shift, this is a lift for many of them, and they're strapped for funding and they feel overworked. So that is all valid. From this, I think we're learning, and I know that there are several APIs starting to be built, and we are working toward integrating that and transforming the data. And then once that's out there, I think that's when many of these new tools and easy ways to answer the questions that are out there can start to be built. And there's a little green box at the bottom that I don't want to forget to mention. But as New Mexico selected this Sensor Things API format, the federal agency, the USGS, that also has a lot of water data, decided, well, that looks good, we'll do that too. So I like to think that New Mexico is actually leading the way in some of these ideas. And a lot of that is due to the support that we've had working with the Internet of Water, which is a group out of the Duke University. They have a philanthropically supported organization that's there specifically to help states bring their data to a more modern space. So
Stacy?
Yes, Deborah.
Mark popped a couple of questions
I
in
can't
the
keep
chat.
track of the questions, sorry.
No, that's okay. Do you want me to read them to you?
Sure.
Okay, what volume of data are you collecting and at what rate?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that question. What we're at the state of in this kind of map right here on the screen is we've inventoried a lot of the data sources and we put them together in a data catalog. And that's identified over here in this little data store. I don't know the number of data. I do have, I wonder if Andrew would pinch hit that one or maybe answer it in the chat, but I don't know this straight up number of data. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Have you adopted a specific metadata standard for describing the water data?
So that's one of our working groups, the technical working group that was in the governance structure. They are building a metadata standards requirements that has been a discussion for the last, I don't know, monthly they meet, and over the last 6 months, they've basically been building that. So yeah, and that will be, we're hoping, out for review in June.
Are you, let's see, are you actively harmonizing disparate data? Andrew? Or the next one, and the next one is, are you seeking volunteers to assist in API development at the ETL level? I think that's Mark. Mark, after Andrew comments, Mark, why don't you jump in and visit?
Yeah, so I would say that the process of taking the disparate sources and then moving that to this common data model. So Sensor Things is both an API and a flexible data model, which primarily targets time series location-based data, which happens to be the predominant data set that we're collecting. So you can think of that as our common data model, and the path towards mapping to that, in addition to all the other types of metadata, such as common units, et cetera, that would be the harmonization process, if I had to use that term. There's a lot there currently right now. A lot of the data sources, it's mostly a batch base. Some of them are very small, but as we move towards the more real-time sensors, yeah, we're going to see more live feeds coming through into the Sensor Things model. That's where it'll get interesting. And perhaps Stacy will talk about once we have, obviously, once you have a common way to access the data, there's a lot of possibilities, such as visualizations, specifically map-based visualizations, where you can say, I live in Albuquerque, what's going on with water in this location? And so no matter what type of data source you have, if they all pivot on location, you can kind of tie all those data sources in and drill down no matter what shape they take.
Yeah.
Leave it at that for now.
Terrific, terrific. And Mark, did you want to
That answered a lot of my
unmute?
question. Just, can you hear me okay? I just want to check.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I mean, that's perfect. So I lead a project at the University of New Mexico called the Environmental Data Initiative. It's in essence an environmental data center. We collect data we're an open publishing data source for environmental and ecological data. We've been doing it since 2013 actively, primarily through the Long-Term Ecological Research Network program, but we are now open for basically working with other data publishers, those who produce data, who want to publish data through an open system. So those are the reason why I'm just very curious. That's very, it's a great presentation. Thank you so much. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
And
I'd
Mark,
love to.
And I am a software developer, although I'm a volcanologist by training. But so, yes, I'm curious whether or not you do seek volunteers to help in that type of API development and things like that. So.
Yeah. And if I'd had to, put together a list of like my top needs, I think that is definitely a big need. We also, just at this point, wrangling the data, I just know that that's not anyone's favorite thing to do, but that is part of the where things are right now. Is I can point people to, like, I know there's a bunch of data over here and we just need to go and kind of ferret it out and help them sort it out, understand what it is that we're asking them to do. So yeah, that I would love to talk with you more, Mark, on that and get a better feel for how we might collaborate going forward. One of the other kind of API tools that we're looking forward to working with our collaborator at Internet of Water is that they're building a tool that is kind of intended for folks like me who are familiar with like an Excel spreadsheet and taking that data and lining it up using their GUI to put that data out on a Sensor Things data format API ready to go. So basically just kind of lining up those data features and pushing it out and making it accessible. So I think that moving into that realm will also make a lot more data accessible that may not be like huge batches, but those a lot of the university type data sources, some of the environment department data sources that I'm aware of, those historical kind of one-time things can start to also become more available. So there's a lot of new and exciting things in this realm that I'm looking forward to playing with.
Oh yeah, just open data in general just empowers science so much, and it's a segue for the public to actually see what we do as scientists and what the state actually is collecting and what it means to the public. And this is great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Terrific, Mark. Yeah, so I put Stacy's email address in the chat, so you can add yours and or you two feel free to collaborate. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to see how I'm doing on time. I think I have only a few more slides to go through. And again, feel free to interrupt me again, Deborah or others. Okay, so I love this analogy. I love analogies in general, but this one in particular, the three-headed dog, as some of our big challenges in this water data work. We have this person who just wants to know, like Andrew was saying, is what's going on in water in my particular location in Albuquerque, or that person who's going up to some lake and their dog wants to swim in it. Is it safe to let the dog swim? Is it safe to let my kids play in the river in my location? So we have a lot of folks out there who just want to know the answer to a particular question. And we have some real big challenges in the water data realm that we have to get through. And that three-headed dog from the Harry Potter movie is just a perfect analogy. And that, those three big challenges I think that we're facing are first of all, that willpower challenge, thinking about how many of our data providers and state agencies in this realm are doing things the way they've always done it, and it's hard to change. It's hard to make, I guess it's hard to shift that what the current practice is and think bigger than the way we've always done it. And that's true in so many instances in life. We tend to avoid change as humans as much as possible. The technical barrier, I think, is real as well. So many of the staff that we're working with they haven't had the exposure to some of this modern technology. And so we're really looking forward to building these conversations and continuing to just kind of immerse in this open data conversation, and getting students fresh out of school to participate in data challenges and work with us so that they can then move into helping some of these agencies move ahead. And then the third big one is related to the financial parts of this. And so it is absolutely real that many of our state agencies that are asked to work on this water data initiative are very tight in their budget, and their data systems are lagging way behind. They just don't have the resources or the capacity to move things forward as quickly as we would like. So just acknowledging that reality of our challenges, and then trying to stay positive here, I want to acknowledge some of the advantages that we have here in New Mexico. I think that the fact that we have a very small population in so many cases really works to our advantage. We're able to quickly build relationships and quickly move through a lot of different people working on improving data sharing practices. And apparently having a small population is also great for herd immunity towards COVID. So we can just get out to all the different people across the state. And so that small population is, in my mind, quite a win. Looking at drought and climate change. So we're talking about this before we started the webinar. The drought monitor from early March is quite red, dark orange, pretty alarming to see. And climate change is impacting New Mexico. And the little graph that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, there's already about 2 degrees C warmer temperatures annually in New Mexico since the 1980s. And so as the air gets hotter, it gets thirstier, and we lose more water to evaporation. And so a lot of this drought and climate change is pushing us to get this done, to improve access to water data so that we can respond to many of these challenges that are coming ahead. And then I think having the legislation, the statute that requires us to make our data more interoperable, more easily shared, better managed, is definitely keeping this activity on the radar. It's not going to be something that any of these agencies are able to just set back to the back burner, because it's required by state law to participate in. So I just wanted to capture a few quick lessons learned on this whole thing. But again, as a geologist, hydrologist, not a data person, I really kind of expected that we would start this effort and we would find 1 or 2 awesome data nerds to help us with this. We might call them a unicorn that would solve all of our problems. And in fact, there really aren't any unicorns, but we have built a really impressive team of folks that are working in some ways just little part-time bits of their time, putting some resources into this. That has moved the needle quite far ahead. And Andrew Padilla on your board is also one of those parts of the unicorn that I would acknowledge. It's helped us get this project off the ground. As I've mentioned repeatedly, the agencies do need to increase their funding. So building the awareness in New Mexico about how our state agencies are funded and how if we want anything to change, we're going to have to put a little time and money into this to improve the data management and how their data are being shared. Starting a water data initiative, I think it's absolutely essential that there is some startup funding and a place to grow that. And so though it is a shoestring budget that we're working from right now, I think that that's still better than in some places where they have no budget to start with, at least have some nest egg to start from. The community of support, groups like this, the New Mexico Tech Council, as well as the support that we've gotten from a number of different states around us, and the groups like the Internet of Water, the West Big Data Innovation Hub, the Western States Water Council, have all reached out and all offered, support in some way, ideas, collaborations. So having, I've just been so impressed with the amount of knowledge that's out there and the willingness for people to kind of jump in and help with this. So that has been really helpful for New Mexico to move ahead on this. And I think that this point is important, that maybe not as resonating with a tech group like you all, but I really do think that many parts of this project, I sit there and we have a lot of different data out there, and I think the data are really important, but many times it comes down to the people who we need to communicate to, the people who have the data, who understand what the data represents. That I think is really, sorry, are you guys able to see my screen? I just realized the chat thing was in the middle of it all. Okay. The people are the connections that we have to start with to then get to the data connections, because if they're not willing or understanding what we're trying to do, then the data doesn't necessarily flow right with them. I think there's one more point here. Oh yeah, and anytime that we get a chance, I think all of you guys know this, is just to celebrate those little wins and those little successes. And so in this whole initiative, I think I want to acknowledge that there's actually been, in some ways, greater successes working with some of our regional data providers, like City of Albuquerque, for example, has been able to share data to us. We're making that available and work through some steps with them much more quickly than some of our state agencies, just because they have the capacity and the willingness to do so. And so celebrating those small wins can hopefully build that snowball effect and have more and more either small providers or some of our state agencies learning through that example and growing the data effort as well. So I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of different collaborators on this effort from all over the state and the country. You can find out more about this and see different data features in different formats. If you go to newmexicowaterdata.org, we have also just started our social media presence. If you want to get on that and follow or like or whatever people want to do on those realms as well. And then finally, I'll just close with this thank you. I appreciate the invitation to talk with you. I think our three big asks at this point is that we're looking for further collaboration and support. In particular, we're looking to increase the access to some of our water data. If you know of little pots of water data, we're also looking for building the resources and funding for this effort. So if you've got a leprechaun with a pot of gold, I'd love to know more about that. And then finally, to Mark's point, I would love it to, if there's ways that we can share some of the resources in terms of time and people energy to build some of this, I would love to know more about that. So my email address is there, and that is my last slide.
I have a question for you here real quick too. This is Michael. My question is, obviously you talked about the aspects of the challenges collecting the data, the challenges of accessing the data, and then wanting to present the data. But can you, maybe give a brief kind of synopsis of how are you analyzing the data? Because obviously those previous problems have to really being affected, have to really affect your ability to get a bigger picture, to analyze what's going on, to track the trends over time, to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I feel like because we're still very much at that beginning phase of this to evaluate where our data sources are coming from, and you mentioned all of that we're still very much at the part of building the plane while flying it. I think that the analyses that we're looking forward to doing are some of the predictive kind of tools that are needed to help evaluate different options and different scenarios in the water world. So like right now, one example that comes to mind is that some of the water management agencies in particular have models that are very robust in terms of those predictive analysis tools that they can use to play out different scenarios for how one change in water diversion for irrigation might actually make more water available for environmental flows for fish or something like that. So playing with that sort of analysis is great, especially improved if they have it with real-time data, with some of the historic data. And so we're working with some of those agencies to help make sure that they know that there's APIs coming available that they can use for their modeling efforts. And I think in a more kind of simple way of using this, models are really robust for making those big management decisions. But for like the day-to-day person who just wants to know, like, should I buy a house over here? Is the groundwater safe to drink? Is the water level dropping in my location? Do I need to be cautious of that? Using the data provided from some of the different data streams. So right now, like if you're looking at groundwater quality, for example, you have to go to 5 different places to bring that data together. So I think that we're looking forward to creating that visual tool that says, drop a pin here and look at the water quality data for that location, anything around there, and just get a sense of like, A, is there data available? And B, is there anything alarming or concerning that might be impacting that decision?
It sounds like you've thought about some of the frameworks on that, on what you want to get to as far as, what information you want to have available, how that's structured. It sounds like you've thought a lot about the framework that you want to plug the data into. It's just a matter of translating now to collecting and interfacing with that data to get it there.
I think that's a good summary. Yeah, we're really at the building the different pipelines to create some of those visuals, but the analysis, yeah, I really look forward to getting to that phase of this project. Really, starting to play with it. And we have a lot of examples. I think that that's the cool thing, is that there's some really great points to learn from. Again, looking to some of our other neighboring states, they have some really dynamic decision support tools already built that we can glean lessons learned. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time and coming here. I'll open it up if anyone else has any final questions that they'd like to ask.
So this is Tony. How much interest are you getting from, for example, some of the real estate developers? I mean, New Mexico is experiencing a pretty crazy real estate world, and part of the answer to that is building more houses, which is a nice thing to do if you can have water. And there must be agricultural bodies, be they cattlemen or big agricultural producers of various other sorts, who are totally dependent upon water availability. Are they being supportive of what you're doing?
I think in general, yes, that there is support for the the concept here of making more data available. And I think a lot of them just want having to have those tools available for their own, you know, they're already there, they're already working the land, they already have some time and money already invested in it. But I do see resistance in some of those sectors to having this data out there, because of when, you know, something is sold, you want to go and look and say, you know, is this a sustainable location? I haven't worked directly with the real estate industry for this topic, and I'd love to kind of get connected with them to get a better sense of how this could support and not hinder that work. And then, yeah, for the agricultural community, we've done some research that basically starts to use this kind of data and evaluate the lifetime of an aquifer. And when we start to see that the lifetime is much less than what one would want for a long-term investment, that's where we, you know, that's the reality of water in the desert, is that it may not be here forever. And so we have to kind of, I don't know, at some point we kind of have to accept that reality and figure out how we want to use what little is left. But yeah, I was actually really impressed when the legislation was going through the Capitol in 2019, just how many farmers and ranchers were in direct support of it. We had cattle growers and pecan growers and everything from, you know, the environmental groups to the non-environmental groups. I don't know, the different agencies that supported it were across the wide range of backgrounds and political interests. So yeah, I don't know how that one's going to play out, but I am a little I'm open to hearing more about it, and would love to figure out a way that we can
An
work
example
together.
that comes to mind is, it was just announced in the last couple of weeks, there's a development being done right adjacent to Santa Fe of 300 and something homes by, I don't know, Pulte or one of the big home developers. Somebody granted a permit, which suggests they must have modeled water availability. And beyond that, there's a whole lot of, and what actions, you know, if you want to taking, because that's a multi-million-dollar project for them. What actions is anybody taking to make sure that they have enough water they can sell those houses?
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to,
Well,
it'd be
I
good to
would
have the
start
data
with
to
who
make sure
grants
that we can
permits.
answer that question. Yeah.
okay, I would start with who grants permits.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's probably a thing you can get your hand on.
Right.
Yeah, I would think so. Just like the example of Los Lunas and the water rights, where they have a water bottling company that they recruited a number of years ago that then they want to expand, but the village is like, hey, we brought you in here at first and we offered you some incentives with the water usage, but now you can pay $4 million to get the water rights to expand your, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the Office of the State Engineer is also, they're charged with regulating that. I think to Tony's point about they issue the permits for water use. But they're also, I feel like in some ways become that enforcing some of that is really hard. And so the regulatory side of it gets set with a lot of times the counties or the municipalities to enforce.
Yeah.
Stacy, one thing that I'm doing, I'm working with the Village of Los Ranchos and New Mexico State University on agri-futures and having a lot of meetings. I think it'd be really beneficial to have you and your group talk with this. It's a pretty broad-based group on talking about agriculture and water, and I'll send you an email on it. But I invited my friend Gene Seville to this meeting yesterday, and he's a New Mexico Tech environmental graduate, and he does irrigation. He says, "What are you interested in water for?" I had to sort of take a deep breath, and I think my entire business has been related to water. And from my father working on the dam up at El Vado in 1932, which was a Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District project. But I've done all kinds of stuff. But I said, the more I learn about water, the less I think I know. So I really like you acquiring this data, because I've got a lot of questions. I don't know if there's answers.
In some cases, there aren't.
Yeah.
That's the reality. It's New Mexico in so many ways is it's such a wonderful state to live in, and yet it has so many complexities. And I relate most of it back to the geology. We have a little bit of everything here. Got some volcanoes and faults and basins and flatlands, and it's just, yeah, the water through this state is anything but simple.
Yeah.
If you want simple, you can move to Nebraska. That's where I'm from. I'm okay. I'm legitimate to make fun of Nebraska.
Terrific, Joe. Yeah, that would be great. So look, that feels nice. Maybe a couple, 2 collaborations for you that came out of this call with Mark and his group, and Joe and the work that he's doing.
Yeah, I would love to talk more with you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy. That was a wonderful presentation, and we'll record it, or I've got it recording. So if, we'll share the link with you once we download it and share it with everyone else on the call.
Great.
And will the slides be available also?
Yes, I will PDF them and send them over.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is that okay? Not PowerPoint? PDF is fine.
Yes.
Yeah. And Stacy, if you send them to me, I'll go ahead and share them with all the other folks who missed out today.
Okay. Thank you.
So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.